Recording?
Done.
Great, I see that. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Todd Coley. I'm a principal and landscape architect with Smith Group here in San Francisco. And I'm part of the Northern California ASLA Chapter's Executive Committee. So on behalf of the chapter, thank you again for being here. Just a few housekeeping notes. Some of you have put on your videos, so that's great. But if anybody else feels comfortable with that, it'd be really great because everyone's in isolation. So it's really great to see other people's faces. For those of you who want to know who are on the executive committee for our chapter, you'll see ASLA NCC in front of their names. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us directly through the chat, or you can find us online. During this whole presentation, we can utilize the chat function. On the right, you can pop open the chat and ask questions over there, and I'll try to get to them. If we have a more intimate group like this near the end still, maybe we'll unmute everyone and allow people just to ask Kelleann directly some questions. So as you've seen in emails and chapter social media, we've been doing this now since last summer. We're happy to report that a couple months ago we showed you that we had speakers from January through June. Our team has been working diligently to find more speakers, so we've got another 4 months booked, and we're looking for 2 more now to finish out the 2021 year. So we're really excited about this series and the lectures that are from these industry icons. Today, of course, we've got Professor Kelleann Foster. But before we introduce her, I'd like to turn the mic over to one of our teammates, Colette, who's here. You can see her online for a brief announcement.
Hi, everyone. My name's Colette Curran, and I'm a volunteer with the ASLA NCC Emerging Professionals Committee. I'm a part of a subgroup called the Bay Area LARC, which stands for Landscape Architecture Resources Community. And we're working on a project that involves creating an online platform that will increase the accessibility and awareness of resources related to landscape architecture and provide opportunities for people to connect with each other through shared interests. So recently we've been spreading the word about our project through social media posts, reaching out to professors via email. We created an email account, which I'll post in the chat if any of you want to send us an email. We also created a Google form, so that way people can share any landscape architecture resources with us. We're interested in hearing about all kinds of resources, including books and research papers on various topics such as environmentally friendly designs, diversity and inclusion in landscape architecture, and then also layer prep, webinars, or any useful resource we'd be glad to hear about. And we have a link tree that we created. So we've been posting some of our social media engagement, the list we've started so far. And we've got some feedback already from professors and people who filled out the poll, got a lot of great responses. And if any of you want to share some resources, feel free to send us an email, fill out the poll, or if you have suggestions or want to get involved in our project, we'd love to hear from you. So here's I'm gonna add the link tree in the email right now. And there we go. Yeah, so thank you for your time, and I hope to hear from you soon.
Great. So thanks so much, Colette, for telling us about this. I really appreciate your time. Are you going to stay on with us for the?
I am.
Oh, excellent. Cool. All right. So today I'm going to introduce Kelleann so that she can get started. So we've got the pleasure of listening to Professor Kelleann Foster of Penn State University. She's a director of the Geodesign graduate program at Penn State and a professor in landscape architecture department. She has 35 years of professional experience as a landscape architect and 30 years of teaching at Penn State. She's a registered landscape architect whose work is rooted in outreach that is interdisciplinary and forward-thinking. She's a proven leader in design and is regularly sought as an invited speaker at national and international design, planning, and technology-focused conferences. The Geodesign program that she runs is offered solely online, which makes it a worldwide platform for graduate students. Thousands of people have heard her talk about how geodesign can change your world. She is also the author of a book, Careers in Design, Becoming a Landscape Architect, which is published by Wiley, that I was actually happy to be a part of. A fun fact, she's friends with the CEO of Esri. For those of you who don't know who Esri is, it's the GIS company that was founded in 1969 by Jack Dangerman. And he's probably one of the, at least financially, probably one of the most successful landscape architects in the world. He supported her sabbatical at Esri at the headquarters in Esri in Redlands, California. Geodesign is one of his lifelong dreams of how technology can be combined with design. And now Kelleann is on the forefront of how to utilize these great technologies to help communities build better places. I'm happy to have known Kelleann since 1993 when I was a sophomore at Penn State. And I'm so glad that she has relocated to California and is able to be more engaged with our chapter. I see her wearing numerous hats from professor, innovator, mentor, and friend. On behalf of the chapter, please welcome Kelleann.
Okay, very good. Thank you all. This is super. Go ahead and dive in. I've got a PowerPoint queued up here. Can you hear me okay? All right, there it is. I need to do this slideshow. Okay, all righty. So I really appreciate this invitation. Thank you, Todd, and everybody. I've had a lot of fun putting this together, sharing what I've been up to for, I don't know, the last couple of decades. So how many of you, when you fly, like the window seat? That might be a common characteristic of landscape architects, right? So this is nothing like a clear day and a window seat. So this is the mighty Susquehanna River. I took this photo flying between State College and Philadelphia. And I just love how you can look out and see the variety of landscape types and natural processes at work. And of course, the impact of the human in the built environment. Those can, of course, often lead to fragmented habitats. And I, for one, have true concerns when I see developments like this. Not well planned, right? Unfortunately, this sprawl type of development is most times it's meeting the codes. It's what the community is unwittingly telling the developers they want to be built. And I became increasingly frustrated, this is earlier in my career when I was in private practice, increasingly frustrated with that disconnect between what folks would say what they want in their community and what they actually allow to be built in their communities. But of course, it doesn't have to be this way. And I am not anti-development. I'm just against poorly conceived development. So part of this experience, so my work then over the years has been primarily rooted at the community scale. And part of this experience and frustration led me to the university to be a professor and do applied research and try to work to combat this. Okay, how come it's not advancing? There we go. And as Todd mentioned, I did write a book to promote the profession of landscape architecture. And I did this because I care deeply about what we do and the impact landscape architects can have on our world. I want to ensure that we're proactive about the future of the profession. And if this proactive stance is why I've embraced geodesign. As you're going to see, I really feel it's a subset of landscape architecture. So this was published just over a year ago. Bran Farren is the COO of Applied Minds, and he's the former president of research and development at Walt Disney's Imagineering. Among the many things he talks about in this article is this quote: "If we can actually see things happening with our own eyes before they happen in the future and appreciate the consequences of those actions, we might just change how we act in the present. Geodesign allows us to do that," end quote. So now I want to quickly share with you how I got to where I am now with geodesign. So my career has really been a sustained effort to try to demystify this process of land planning and design, and importantly, to make it more accessible and understandable and responsive to a community's wishes. And this led to trying to tackle that legalized, hard to understand regulatory text, kind of makes your eyes glaze over. So initially I started doing this through image simulations, doing photorealistic simulations of regulatory requirements. So this is large lot zoning in an ag district. And then what the community says they want. In this case, the comprehensive plan says, we want ag in our ag district. So it's still allowing housing, but has agriculture included in it. So for some of you, this may not seem very groundbreaking, right? Image simulations, but back in the early and mid 90s, it was really pretty novel for folks to see their regulations in photorealistic living color. This is really my first foray into using technology to enhance understanding. And this quick series here was working with the town to help them see that suburban setbacks and suburban building forms would be slowly eroding and transforming their historic town character if they let it continue. So as you're going to see here, I've explored a variety of unique technology-enabled projects. And I want to be really clear here. Although I led these projects, these were all team efforts. So I'm really grateful to my tech savvy and very creative colleagues. Great partnerships. So next we tackled that actual regulation format itself, putting this really hard to comprehend legal text into an interactive, dynamic, colorful format. And I have to share with you that this was actually prior to the internet being robust enough. This was back in the mid 90s. So initially we were doing these codes on CD-ROMs. So yes, I'm that old. So it's called the Visual Interactive Code. So its name kind of says what it is. So we are transforming that policy communication by adding photographs, pop-up explanations. You can see little video clips or series of photos. This led my tech-savvy colleague, Todd knows him, Tim Johnson. He and I started a company called the Vic Group. And we actually did this endeavor long enough that these codes did become web browser capable, or maybe I should flip it around and say the web finally became robust enough to support these dynamic codes. Then we had a Pittsburgh-based foundation say, okay, those regulations that are easier to understand are really great, but what about communities that don't have these resources? So we created blueprints, best land use principles and results interactively shown. And it's meant to be a kind of a storehouse or a clearinghouse, if you will, of all sorts of unique approaches for communities to be able to understand how they can do sustainable design and planning. So we framed it around 6 main topics, from agriculture to trees and woods. And we talked about this in 3 different community typologies, town, suburban, and rural. And as you can see, the image on the left, it was all produced for CD-ROM distribution. And blueprints never made it to the web. It was always just a CD-ROM product for several years. It was quite valuable and useful to folks. So in Pennsylvania, and I think as in many places, land use regulations are determined at the local level. So citizens and local decision makers really hold the keys to the quality of the development that and how things are being conservation measures in their communities. Unfortunately, they are also the ones with the least information and least knowledge about how to do sustainable design approaches. So as you can see here, we tried to provide kind of, if you will, plain spoken language to get at these issues, included facts and some data to help inform the efforts. We also included hundreds of explanatory and aspirational and inspirational images. So for example, here, we needed to create 36 different image simulations to represent all the various combinations for this suburban street. So for example, a choice of street widths, different setback choices, amenities, whether you have sidewalks or trees, street trees or not. And importantly, remember what we're talking about here is helping them understand they have design choices they can regulate. We're not changing the use. This is still a residential community, but how it will look and how it will feel in their community. So Pennscapes was our next effort. Pennsylvania Strategies, Codes, and People Environments. We had a lot of fun coming up with these names, by the way. So this really was a combination of the visual interactive code format and combining with it many of the concepts from blueprints. So lots of images, explanations, dynamic animations. And you can see here in the lower right there, we actually went so far as to provide ideal sample code language. So they could lift this right out and adopt it. We had actually an attorney involved, and this was meeting the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, the authorizing legislation. So we had the code language for 3 different typologies: rural residential, cluster residential, and mixed use. And Pennscape's goal was to help communities comprehend the interrelated nature of land use and design issues, and inspire them to believe that this kind of development, this sustainable approach, is truly possible in their communities. So here we're showing a similar quantity of development and type of development, but contrasted by how those uses are designed and situated on the site. So mixed use at the top, where, as its name says, uses are mixed, right? And the PUD, which is basically the same uses, but they're kind of segregated or siloed into various parts of the site. We also demonstrated these comparisons through animated design alternatives. So where users could select different choices and they would morph to facilitate the comparison. So the street would get narrower, the trees would populate more of them, or houses would move closer. Back, in those of you who know technology, back when we were doing flash animation, back in the flash animation days. We included lots of choices in the neighborhood interactive diagrams, and importantly, a numeric summary of statistics for each of the neighborhood profiles. So in the lower right, you can see there's some yellow text there that's summarizing the design that's visible under that retractable box. So this is where I really started to push this idea of using data and metrics as a persuasion tool. So you can see they're looking at the conventional development versus the clustered, and the amount of open space, the quantity of units, lot sizes, the amount of street, and this all also relates to economic issues, of course. So the idea of gathering information about a place and showcasing data about places, that's always been a hallmark of what we do, right? But the way that information can now be acquired is evolving, and the quantity and types of data that are becoming available is just simply exploding. So that physical, biological, cultural, economic, those basic things have always been the root of our site analysis work. It's now joined by social data, real-time tracking data, experiential data, and it goes on and on. It's like a fire hose, right, coming at us, almost too much information. But of course, not all of that data is going to be equally useful or viable for the project at hand. And how do you figure out what do we actually need for this particular project? So for me, the first key innovation of geodesign is that it helps to clearly outline the problem in order and the perspective of the community in order to determine what data is going to be best suited to assist in moving through that process. So now I want to transition into talking about geodesign. And it is a design process. It very specifically marries science, and particular geospatial science, with data, and in an iterative, collaborative, creative approach to addressing land use, design, and planning challenges. So this diagram illustrates the collaborative nature of geodesign. See design professionals there, information technology, of course, people of the place, very central, and involving stakeholders and decision makers. So I want to quickly share with you my first experience with geodesign. So Dr. Carl Steinitz, emeritus landscape architecture faculty from Harvard, he's shown in the middle right there. He was a visitor at Penn State. He held one of our endowed chairs. It was back in the fall of 2011, which I realized that's almost 10 years ago now. Interestingly, he was only at Penn State for half a semester. And the studio they were working on was addressing very complex issues related to the fracking. It was when I was talking with some other people, I say exploding the fracking issue. I'm like, oh, that's a bad term to say with fracking, but the expanding fracking issue and shale gas fracking issue in northeastern Pennsylvania. So looking at issues of community health and viability. And the geodesign process quickly gets to the heart of issues, including engaging interested parties and identifying the critical issues. So these are a couple snips from some spreadsheets that the students were using. And I have to say, I was sold. I was just dumbstruck that our students were able to come up with such detailed, thoughtful solutions in half the time that usually took to produce much less exciting work, and particularly for such a complex problem as this. So what really is geodesign? So a couple of years ago in 2019, it was actually the 50th anniversary of the publication of the book Design with Nature by Ian McHarg. When he published this in '69, the book challenged the status quo for design and planning. It really altered how we work by proposing new methods to really provoke innovative spatial and ecological futures. And Tomorrow by Design is now 25 years old. So part of the answer to what is geodesign is that it's carrying on the great work of these two innovative designers and planners and advancing their ideas through the use of new dynamic technologies and refinement of their processes. And at this point, I really think it's important. I want to clarify that geodesign is not GIS. It's not Geographic Information Systems. In fact, a friend from Esri, Bill Miller, he pointed out 3 waves of GIS evolution, and I'm going to add a 4th wave. And so he said, first was, he had all this data, and you actually had to bring it into this digital realm, right, and bind it and secure it so it could be delivered on these digital maps. So, and there was developing what they called geo databases. And then that migrated to the second segment where you're doing analysis and processing these features. So you're analyzing things for various purposes and reasons. And then the third segment of GIS is design, and that's more recent. And so you have all this interesting information that now you can do creative work with that information and those analysis. So, and I think, to me, the 4th wave is that we're now really able to engage our clients and stakeholders in better understanding the potential consequences of those creative ideas, and doing that via real-time dashboards and interactive graphics. So to me, it's this use of geospatial data to explore the impacts of the design ideas. It's really at the heart of geodesign. So, and I do feel that it is a branch of landscape architecture. It fuses design processes with geospatial technologies, and is allowing us to design places in this data-rich knowledge now of what those consequences could be. And of course, it's very collaborative. No one profession can do to tackle these complex issues out there. So to me, it's really, geodesign is like a smart design strategy. And especially with all the information out there now, it can help us avoid analysis paralysis, right? And because it embraces this real-time information sharing and being able to test ideas quickly, it really builds, it has a lot of transparency to it. So it really builds trust with the community, which is so important. So to me, geodesign is really this important negotiation tool where we're trying to work with diverse groups and seeking a compromise, seeking to come up with the best design solution, right? And what it's trying to do is shift that paradigm from a winners and losers, if you will, to a win-win situation where everyone benefits to some degree, or they see the benefit to some degree. And that's because of this transparency and building that trust, that people are engaged all the way along the process, so they understand how it's involved and they've been part of the trade-off discussions. And of course, this need for negotiation and collaboration is pervasive across scales, all scales of design and planning. For problems at the global scale, I would say that the geographic sciences really are the best guidance. And when we get right to the site scale, very small scale, design professions can handle it on their own, right? But there's a big middle ground there where this idea of using the geodesign approach is really going to be helpful. So it's especially cute when you're trying to balance these supply-based defensive strategies, balancing those with the demand-based offensive strategies, and where your client and stakeholders aren't always in agreement. And so when you've got these complex situations where achieving this collaboration, understanding, and negotiating is not easy, this is a role for geodesign. So this is the geodesign framework espoused by Dr. Steinmetz. I'm not going to try to go through it, but there are 3 iterations through the framework, and it's 6 models that you're working through. But what I just want to mention here is that what to me is the thing about following this process is that you quickly get a clear sense of the shared purpose and goals. And that really informs the criteria and the metrics that can guide the creation of design options. And then those same metrics can be used to evaluate the outcomes of those, how well those design proposals are achieving the desired outcomes. So this measuring performance aspect is really a key thing that distinguishes geodesign. And in particular, this measuring performance utilizing the dynamic geospatial tools to provide the ability to understand the performance of what the community has identified as their key criteria. To do that on the fly, in real time, this transparent feedback is extremely valuable to build that stakeholder understanding and support. So this lively comparison and visualization of factors really helps you see those consequences of change choices and potential actions. So if you think about Brand Farron's quote at the beginning. And I'm really happy to share this with you. So concurrently, when I agreed to speak with you guys today, I hadn't paid attention that carefully to the dates. Right now, I'm participating, it's virtual, but the annual Geodesign Summit was yesterday and today. So, and this was from my colleagues at Jacobs, a project they're working on in North London. And I asked if I could share this slide with you, because I think it's a really great example of how you have your citizens and stakeholders outline the project goals. They've got it listed as an objective, and then identify the targets for success. So what are these metrics then, both qualitative and quantitative measures? And how are we going to assess those impacts? What are those assessment models? So in this case, it's a park life at the doorstep. So they're looking at the total play space per child, the spatial distribution of open space, distance to play spaces from residential uses, and so on. One more example from this North London project. So this one is mixing uses and animating streets. Again, they've got both quantitative and qualitative targets that they're working towards. And they're looking at, they want to animate that ground floor, right, with non-residential uses, and visualization of how these street typologies of scale and massing, cycling and walking time to bus stops. So these are some of the models they're doing to assess how well they're accomplishing these things. And as I said before, geodesign is not GIS, and it's also not just GIS in the technology world. It is a design process that's aided by a suite of technology. So here's just an example from one firm that's a variety of technologies that Household Levine is using. And interestingly, they're based in Chicago, but they've just opened an office here in California, down in Pasadena. So California connection. So now I want to go ahead and share with you a couple of examples, some projects. And so this is in Manitou Springs. It's a creek walk. And this project, this community had desired a creek walk for a couple of decades. They kept doing countless studies and kept running into barriers. So within 6 months of taking them through this geodesign process, the city and the interested stakeholders came to an agreement on a final design. I just want to read what the economic development director said. She said, communities are demanding transparency from their city leaders. Geodesign enables officials to clearly and succinctly explain the process and build confidence in citywide projects. And this is a necessary and often missing part of so many community efforts. Using the geodesign process, we're able to preserve the passion and popularity of the project without turning it into a divisive issue. So this gets back to what I said, everyone understands there's some benefit in there for them, and it wasn't any winners and losers. Everyone saw the benefit and they could go forward. This is another example, a more suburban or rural example. It's a growing township in Pennsylvania. This particular property had been stalled for years, kind of loggerheads with the developer who owned the property and what they wanted to do and what the township was allowing for the regulations. And again, working through this geodesign process, in just a few months, they came to an agreement. So there were stakeholder workshops where land use choices could be manipulated in real time. And importantly, the land use choices were tied to key metrics. And you can see these dashboards. I don't know if you can read that. It says school-age children, single-family dwellings, the population, retail, job capacity. And when you go to the next slide, you can see the dashboard. If you go toggle back and forth. And so, and this was a capstone project with our student, and he said that doing this during this the workshops, working with this stakeholders, these real-time changes really encouraged productive stakeholder negotiations. He had a really great couple examples of the farmer talking to the business owner, and they actually realized, oh, we have a common agreement about something. So it helps facilitate the dialogue. At this point too, I want to make sure it's clear that geodesign is useful for a wide variety of type of land uses. So it's beneficial for conservation issues as well. In fact, our spring geodesign studio is working on greenway, a statewide greenway in Florida. And though this is the example I've got in front of me here is from central Pennsylvania, where the university asked us to assist with a key piece of ag land that they have. The challenge with this effort was that there are many community members had a distrust with the university and what they might do with the land. So we worked right from the beginning with key influencers and stakeholders to assess the community values and needs. And you can see there, the different colors are different priorities. You can see how they changed by the different use groups. And then there's starting to map out some of their desired uses. And again, transparency and involving everyone from the beginning was really important. So we created, you can see the dashboards across the top that showed the factors that were important and provided real-time feedback during the workshops, allowing the participants to see the impacts as they're making choices, and that actually allowed us to come to this consensus design, consensus diagram. A couple of urban examples. This is in Sydney, Australia. So it was an intensive 3-day workshop, and they implemented this because they had no available method for bringing multi-agency collaborative planning effort together that could effectively integrate this fragmented knowledge and this diverse stakeholder base. So although it was a 3-day workshop, there was a fair bit of work beforehand to actually bring all this into this really dynamic, it's called Geodesign Hub, online facilitation tool. In the end, you can see the 6 categories across the top with different emphasis, from development and environmental focus to a tourism focus, but they ended up rapidly developing 6 urban growth scenarios, a whole slew of projects and policies that they could work on, as well as some goals and concerns, but it was hugely beneficial moving forward with plans for 2050. And this is a master's project with one of our students. He was working on the redevelopment of a former military base right in the heart of Colima, Mexico. And I know you can't read these charts, and that's okay. In fact, unless you know Spanish, I think some of them maybe even Spanish, but you can see the color coding, right? The red, green, yellow. And what I want to point out here is that the beauty of geodesign is you have all these factors and all these issues, but you can start to call them down fairly quickly and assign things that are higher priorities, lower priorities, more meaningful, et cetera. And also apply weighting measures to them. So they ended up with 12 possible land uses that they defined, and each one had a numeric value for like a social value, water requirements, parking, job generation, and so on. And the result was 2 plausible scenarios. And importantly, these alternatives, it's now a model that they can continue to work with and manipulate on the fly. They can simply modify sizes or uses or types of uses, or assumed values can be plugged in. In fact, I just recently had some correspondence with Jose, and this was the end of his capstone, but it's still continuing, and they're working towards one consensus final plan. So now I'm going to stop sharing, and Krista, I think if you wouldn't mind sharing a video, I want to quickly share a video here. It's only 3 minutes, so. Sort of summarizes what I've talked about and shows that we're moving into 3D gaming.
Land is fundamental to life on Earth. Everything is rooted in this common ground. But our world is facing unprecedented challenges. The norms previously guiding how we make decisions and plan for the future no longer apply. We need unique but proven tools and processes to uncover innovative planning and design solutions.
I think that we're experiencing a renaissance in the way we approach problems in this country and around the world, and geodesign gets it. Geodesign understands that there are multiple disciplines needed to come together to address big problems.
Geodesign is a powerful method fueled by stakeholder input and innovative technology to dynamically illustrate the impacts of alternative scenarios. It's the perfect process for envisioning sustainable and resilient answers to today's problems.
And the negotiation, I think, for me as a landscape architect, is hugely important. I have spent so much time at community meetings where you have to leave, come back next month, and come back with a new design. And so geodesign has been fabulous because we can do it there on the spot and get immediate feedback.
If we achieve that collective vision, that's really when good things happen. That's when we can make design decisions that we've not been able to make before, because people are willing to accept changes that they weren't willing to make before, because now they realize that is the best solution for the entire community and they're part of that community.
Geodesign enables win-win outcomes for a variety of challenging situations.
The town was crippled about making the decision within their town center, concerned about the impacts of height and density, and we were able to use a geodesign workflow and suite of tools to give them an immersive 3D experience, to be able to toggle between scenario A and scenario B and go look at the impacts. And it certainly was a win for the town. They embraced more compact built form versus a sprawling suburban type of commercial area. Never could happen without the geodesign workflow and the tools that we use.
So for this creek walk, this little town, everyone is very active in government, very vocal, let's say. And so by bringing everybody together, again, through this geodesign process where they could see the qualitative impact and the quantitative impact of different scenarios, they could pick the best scenarios for the different groups and also eventually create this combination of things that fit everybody. There was absolutely no conflict. We were able to preserve the passion of the people and provide them with a clear path to the future.
Ignite your current expertise by adding geodesign to your skill set. Penn State's Geodesign program prepares you to be a leader in designing a resilient future. Earn a geodesign graduate degree from your current location in your spare time. If you want to change the world, Geodesign provides a powerful strategy for success. If you want geodesign, Penn State's innovative online program is your best choice.
Okay, I'm gonna jump back here. Share, I just want to go to this last. So, I mean, so I'm wrapping up here. So as you can see, I am enamored with geodesign. And as such, as Todd said, I head up our online graduate certificate and master's degree in geodesign. And for me, what's really important about this is I feel that this, as I said, it's a subset of landscape architecture, that we designers need to be embracing this more. I've got a lot of students coming through this who are in geography, which is fine, but it is a design field. And as you saw from examples of our student projects, our students do work on real world projects and enjoy experiential learning approach. A few years ago, I also created a MOOC. I don't know if you've heard of MOOCs, massive open online course. Ours is through Coursera. There's TEDx or edX. There's a couple different ones. It's offered 4 times a year. I think the next one actually starts in early March. And a fun feature we included to help better explain geodesign, you can see here there are 5 weeks. So there's 5 different topics across the top of this image here. And for each of the 5 weeks, we put together 3 case studies. So there's 15 total across the globe that help explain geodesign. And we did that in an interactive story map format. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions.
That's great. Thanks so much, Kelleann. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but there's not a ton of people on. I think there's about, oh, Morgan. Morgan is there. That's great. Morgan, why don't you just go for it?
I have a question, and I apologize for having my camera off. I was eating my lunch, and I didn't want to subject any of you to that. But it was a fascinating talk, and it's lovely to see a fellow Nittany Lion present.
I recognize your name, yeah.
It was a treat for me. I volunteer my time as a member of the Sausalito Planning Commission, and learning everything I just did about geodesign. I can find a million ways where that would be helpful to us. We just finished our general plan. For those of you who live in California, know what a general plan process is about, and it will inform all the updates to our zoning ordinance. And in absence of having the time to do a crash course in geodesign online in the next several months, as we start to think about how we might reconstruct our our zoning code, what would you suggest as sort of the best path to, I guess, implement some of these brilliant themes and practices into what we're planning to do?
Whew. Well, are they using a lot of digital tools right now to engage folks?
Ish.
Okay. So that might be a first foray, and because to me, if the general plan is, do you say it's in process or they just complete?
We just approved the new general plan.
Okay, so are you looking at a way to communicate it then, or is there a next step now you want to do with the general?
So we'll start to update our zoning code.
Okay.
And obviously, resilience, sea level rise, all sorts of environmental impacts. We're a small waterside community that has a lot of growth issues and not much space, and and a lot of history, and we want to be sensitive to all of that, and a lot of very active, engaged stakeholders coming from different perspectives. So
to me, that's the other thing that's really cool is a lot of these tools. Our courses are online, so our students are all over the world, and so it's a great way to engage a community because they don't have to all show up at 7 o'clock on a specific night somewhere, right? So you can, in fact, I just saw a really great talk an hour ago of all the different, these are Esri tools, but different ways you can engage communities. One is experience. You can put up a website and people can vote and polling, and you can include animated maps and diagrams in there. So I would say pick whichever zoning district you want to tackle first or topic. I'm realizing now the general plan is probably like our comprehensive plan, right? It sets out the overall framework, and then the regulations are supposed to satisfy those, right? In fact, I remember years ago when I get the clearinghouse publisher calls and says, if you had $1 million, what would you do? And I said, I would sue municipalities because their zoning codes do not reflect their general plan or whatever. So I would say that would probably be the best way. Pick one district or one aspect of the zoning code that you want to try to have it mirror better with. And you could do some mock-ups of some approaches that would satisfy the general plan and show, and again, need to find out what the data is going to be most critical. But tell you what, we could have another conversation.
Okay.
That's a quick thought about how you could approach that. But and I would love to come visit Sausalito. I don't know if you came early enough. So I now live in Auburn, California, actually.
Not that far.
Yeah. So I'd be happy to chat with you again.
Excellent. I will set something up. Thank you.
Yeah.
And one of our teammates, Thea, asked a question that's in the chat. What do you think the scales of geodesign would be? Can you go down as small as a schoolyard, or what's the most effective scales to utilize?
That's a great question. In theory, I would say a schoolyard is too small. However, wouldn't it be cool to get this all animated and have the use choices and stuff and pictures tied with it for kids to be able to play with, to engage the neighborhood kids in designing their schoolyard in a really dynamic way? Now, whether you have to use geodesign tools or some other way. For the most part, though, I usually say like a neighborhood all the way up to, actually I have an example. I think it's one of the case studies. I don't know where it is. I think it's one of the case studies in the MOOC. In Spain, they were trying to route a new electric transmission line through the country. So it could be a whole country. So it's a pretty wide range of scales. Could work. Again, you need to know who your stakeholders or your decision makers are to be able to engage them from the beginning. I'll just share with you quickly, we had a student working in Hong Kong, and then all the unrest started, and he wasn't able to engage the people he had planned to engage in his capstone. But what we did as a stand-in, he went back through and looked at comments online and articles and other social media, and used that as a surrogate. So that there's a way to jumpstart the process of engaging a community by looking at some feedback that's been out there. So.
Another question that's popped up is geodesign and climate change and how the two might connect and how you can see sea level rise effect on communities.
Yes, that's a very key one. We did a project in Florida a few years ago, and the sea level rise simulations and helping to figure out where some new transit would go and development based on sea level rise. Yeah. Any of these things that we have models and data for that you can do these simulations and explore. One of the reasons I wanted to show the video is that more and more things are coming into 3D and being able to explore things in 3D. So absolutely, climate change is definitely one of the drivers of change, if you will, that would be important to bring into the discussion with your stakeholders if they weren't already driving that discussion. Absolutely.
And I see Karen's question also, but I maybe want to start with something first before we get to that. And just an overall, just general question. Is it a program that you download? Is it web-based? Do you log in? How do you get the tools? And then how much GIS do you need to know to actually utilize it?
Okay, great. So the first question is, it's not just a thing. It's not just it's as I showed their diagram, a suite of tools. Let me go back to your second question and I'll come back again. So if you don't know GIS, so I always think about when GIS first came out, and so Todd went through a program where he learned GIS, but it's interesting, when I was starting to talk about geodesign with other landscape architecture colleagues around the country, I was dumbfounded to learn that there's a lot of landscape architecture programs that don't teach GIS. And so to me, and it's one of the things I want to work with LAAB on, the accreditation standards, they require you learn CAD, but we don't require GIS. And I think part of it is when GIS first came aboard, you almost had to know programming to get into it. And it was like, well, the tools are much friendlier now. You need to know, a little bit of under the hood. You kind of like when cars first came out, if you got stuck on the road somewhere with your Model T, you were in trouble unless you knew all the under the hood stuff. Now people don't know anything about other than hitting the gas and brakes. So, and that's where GIS is going. And actually, and talking with Jack Dangerman about this too, he's excited for designers to get more engaged, and he understands that had been a barrier before. So do you need to know GIS? You need to have a good understanding about it, maybe a entry-level understanding, but then you collaborate with people who are a little stronger in that. And I think it's anything like in our landscape architecture profession. Some people are really good at detailing and decks, and other people are good at the broader scale. There's different niches, but you do need to understand what his capabilities are, and the capabilities keep growing. Every time I go to these conferences, I go, wow, my mind just got blown again. I just saw a LiDAR, very detailed LiDAR scan of a couple cities in Europe. And and then you can apply models and do these digital twins. And oh my gosh, it's so exciting. So it's not, so back to your question, Todd, it's not really again, GIS is a design process that's infused with these tools. And it's a series of tools, and the tools are ever changing. In fact, our program, we emphasize the design process because the tools are going to continue to evolve and change. It's just the way the world is, right? But once you know that process, you can apply it to a variety of scales, from conservation issues to urban, really to climate change issues and so on. Just saw a nice presentation earlier today about from the Jane Goodall Center and some of the issues working with the small villages there. And anyway, so did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And then I guess to Karen's question is to actually get this and start the process, how long does it take to kind of set up and get the data points and all of that for your particular project?
Okay, that's a great question. So it depends on the community you're working with, how much data they already have, or your state or your county. Sometimes there's a lot of data available. And Esri has actually, particularly for green infrastructure related things, I should have grabbed that link to have it available, but they've got a whole green infrastructure website on the Esri website, and tons of data. Jack just wants it out there for everybody. And it's really comprehensive for the US, but they're even adding more around the world. They're at HUC level, so it's a watershed. They're the HUC watershed scales, I believe. Some are more detailed. So getting the data is dependent on where you are. But interestingly, one of our students was working in Puerto Rico, and there wasn't a lot of data. And so they crowdsourced. They went out and got data from the community. So, you know, it doesn't have to be buried. If you can't get really sexy dynamic data, you can get some of the basic data depending on what your needs are, what your issues are. So crowdsourcing is a great way to get started too. Citizen science, there's iNaturalist, there's a lot of ways. A whole nother presentation I did a few years ago that I pulled out a whole bunch of crowdsourced data that's for places. So it's almost overwhelming where you can get the data, but there's a lot out there.
If there are some links that you would share with the chapter, we can post those with your, you know, the YouTube, or with just notes that follow up on our website, or we can blast that out. If there's something that you think that you, Jack, other people should just show, hey, this is all out there for free to help us start. Yeah. That would be great.
Yes, great. Yeah.
Just because of time, maybe this would be the last one. This is from Simon. Have you tried incorporating data collection from consumer drones into your projects?
I haven't, but I have
an example.
Yeah, no, I haven't, but I've seen examples of that. Yeah. In fact, was Gene Huntington near your class, Todd? Do you remember Gene? Mm-hmm. So I've kept in touch with him. He's got a whole drone company now. Wow. And he's doing a lot. He's helping with deer overpopulations. I know one of the things and so they go out, he's out at night a lot, getting the infrared to find the deer. But yeah, oh yeah. So, and there's, Esri has a widget or whatever called Drone to Map. So you take your drone data and download it to the map. So yeah, no, that's all possible. So that's another way to get your data for your site, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so many cool things. I mean, you put GPS on a backpack and walk a potential route you want as a trail. And then you record photos or images at certain places that you can embed in there to get people's feedback about, should this be our new trail, for example. Mm-hmm. So there, yeah, it's kind of exciting, overwhelming, but also exciting all at once, how it's possible to both engage people in getting the data and also doing dynamic things with it to engage them in their feedback as well. So
with the drone, just to maybe add on to your answer to Simon, part of our company in our Ann Arbor office, they've been using drones to do temperature gauges for heat island effect of where it's kind of cool, where it's kind of warm, and figure out how to design in that community when you come in as part of the analysis. So that's another interesting kind of layer that you can add to it.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn the mic over to Krista to kind of wrap up this, and we're right at 1, but maybe if some people can stay, Krista, maybe you can wrap it up.
Yeah, well, we just want to thank our audience for tuning in, and we appreciate the lively discussion. Thanks for keeping your Zoom on. I know we have a lot of Zooms these days, but we really appreciate you attending our events. And Kelleann, we're so grateful to have you here today, and thank you for taking us through the process and kind of how these programs have developed over the years. You kind of take for granted how things are today and how easy it is. And so it was really fun to see some of those images. I want to just close out today. If you have any final thoughts or points that you want to leave the audience with.
I mean, I still believe the power that we have as designers of the land and working with people and place is still so important. It gets more important all the time, climate change issues and stuff. And so I just encourage everyone to find the tools and techniques and processes that will really allow what they do to resonate with their clients and with their stakeholders. And you know, if geodesign is it, that's great. But whatever you're doing, it's still so valuable. And thank you all for what you're doing out there.
Great. And Todd, do you have one final plug for our next month session, Lunch with Leaders? I know we got Sarah Hammerschmidt coming.
Yes, so Sarah Hammerschmidt, she is the director of the ULI Building Healthy Places, which is a global initiative that the Urban Land Institute started, and she's in Ann Arbor, and she'll be talking. She's a good friend of mine. I've known her for about 15 years, and she's going to really talk about how we talk about place and doing things that are for the betterment of everyone and better health. Kelleann, thanks so much for joining. I'm sure I'll talk to you soon, and I'll text you some more images of Elodie.
Thank you all. It's been my pleasure. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.